Well, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 18th of May. And I want to do a quick update about the weather and the planting season in the Midwest because it has just been an absolute disaster down there. And of course there is intense flooding taking place in parts of California, and of course they are way ahead in their season. And it seems like half the world is in the cold and half the world is in the hot. Certainly here in Ontario, it has been a long, cold spring. It's been extremely grey, and we've had an awful lot of rain. And it looks like only now, as we head towards the long weekend, that the weather is going to break, and we are heading up to 18 degrees to 20 degrees centigrade, and more importantly the overnight temperatures are coming up to 10 to 12 degrees and being fairly consistent as we get closer towards the end of the month. So I'm thinking that you could certainly plant by the 1st of June, but I would be watching the weather this year because the frost date in our area on the cusp of the 5-6 zone border is the 5th of June. And I have actually seen a couple of frosts on the 5th of June in the past, and so you definitely have to watch out for that. But I'm just fascinated that everywhere you go there is this polarization of the weather, and well, I wonder if the polarization of the weather and the polarization of the politics and the people have a connection. But here is a downpour in Italy, and we are talking basically feet per hour coming out of this cloud. It's a staggering photograph, and yes, that's the sort of thing that we seem to be seeing now. These things are called atmospheric inversions, and they are when the cosmic rays form a deep cloud layer of moisture, and they suddenly break loose, and it literally is like a lake or an ocean pouring out of the sky in a very small area. And yes, I will show you a few photographs of those. They are quite spectacular. The colors are very, very dark and foreboding. And anyway, the food issue is going to be staggering. Okay, when you look at how far behind the planting is, and the loss, 32% of their national strategic store of grain has been destroyed by the flood in the Midwest. And to have down to maybe 20% planting this year, maybe, and they've got another rainstorm coming in, so who knows where that is going to end up. Anyway, let's take a quick look at these photographs, and there's a couple of stories, and then we'll come back and do a quick wrap up. Okay, here we go. The frost that virtually wiped out the 2019 crop in parts of Anjou and the Loire in early April seems to me to have been underreported. Similarly with those parts of Burgundy, notably Rully, that have already suffered 2 fatally severe frosts earlier this month. Part of the problem seems to be that winters are getting milder, so early bud break is increasingly common, putting young vine growth at risk, particularly in our increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. And you can see here, these are fires in the grapevines to try and keep the temperature up to prevent freezing. And here is the AccuWeather 2019 Europe Spring forecast. Spring will arrive early for some parts of Europe, while cold and snow linger on for others. The spring will also feature the risk for flooding rainfall and damaging winds for some, whilst others can expect a change to prolonged dry spells with a risk for a building drought. And here you see the polarization in Europe. Wet, cold, wet, dry, mild. Now I don't know if this is mild and dry, but too much of any one thing is not good as far as farming is concerned. Too much water, too much cold, too much dry. So it's going to be a difficult year, difficult start to the year. And here we are in the US again. You see the polarization. This is an early start to spring, except up here in this little area is the latest spring on record. And you see quite a bit of this dark blue, latest spring on record. But look at the green, the earliest spring on record. Now it's the polarization that's interesting about this, that one part of the US is getting one particular kind of weather and the other is getting a completely different kind of weather entirely. This is unusual. To me, when I see polarization of systems, it to me suggests that the system is now coming undone. You know, like when you spin a coin on a table and it starts to wobble. When it loses energy and it's polarizing, it tends to wobble really wildly backwards and forwards. And this, I believe this is the same thing with the weather. But we're going from the latest spring on record, the early spring on record, to every 38 years or so. And there's lots of areas fall into those extreme positions. The calendar might have said it was spring more than a month ago, but the physical signs of it told a much different story. Spring and its typical green growth arrived later than usual in much of the US, save for parts of the south, thanks to a stubborn weather pattern that most noticeably affected parts of the central and southern plains, northwest and northern New England. And this from the Jamestown Sun. Bumper crop of farm stress, toll mounts with late planting, low prices, rising costs and a trade war. It's been hit and miss, Lindstrom said. He and his brother Eric started planting their corn and soybeans on May 8th, but are scrambling. When conditions are ideal, they can finish their planting in 10 days, but the forecast weather once again looks foreboding. More cool and wet weather is expected. Next week, it looks like rain every day almost, he said last week. Earlier in the day, his brother's truck got stuck in a muddy field. And this from the economic collapse. Total catastrophe for US corn production. Only 30% of US cornfields have been planted. 5-year average is 66%. And yep, that's what a lot of the cornfields look like. US farmers seeded 30% of the US 2019 corn crop by Sunday, the government said, lagging the 5-year average of 66%. The soybean crop was 9% planted, behind the 5-year average of 29%. Iowa, 48% planted, 5-year average 76%. Minnesota, 21% planted, 5-year average 65%. North Dakota, 11% planted, 5-year average 43%. South Dakota, 4% planted, 5-year average 54%. Yes, you read those numbers correctly. Can you imagine what this is going to do to food prices? And just in case you wonder, this is worldwide. The Indian Express, Monday, May 20th. Australia. Australia's east coast will experience dry weather for at least the next 3 months, the country's meteorological bureau said on Thursday, intensifying a drought that has wilted crops and left farmers struggling to stay in business. Australia's agricultural sector will suffer further crop losses, while farmers will also be forced to slaughter livestock in greater numbers as they struggle to find enough food and water to keep them alive. And this from ABC. Drought-hardened graziers broke harden as cattle die in floods. So one part of the country is in drought, and in northwest Queensland they are getting flooded out. Hundreds of cattle are believed to be dead or stranded in northwest Queensland as heartbroken graziers go from a drought to a flooding crisis. And you can see these cattle are in pretty rough shape. And here it is. If I were a cow, I would have chucked in the towel 2 days ago. I wouldn't have been able to have coped any longer than that, I reckon. It's risky to check on cattle, let alone rescue them. For some graziers, cattle, which could have been sold for a possible $50 a head, have now washed downstream. What's really getting to me at this moment is people saying, "You asked for rain, you got it," Mr. Anderson said. Look at that. Look at that. So this is worldwide. The polarization of the weather is worldwide, and it is astounding. Now, I have felt for a very long time that basically what we're looking at for the near future anyways is basically weather chaos. You are not going to know what the seasons will hold. Each season will hold anomalies. And I don't think we're going to get, how can I put it? The weather systems are going to be larger that hit us, but they're going to be moving a lot slower, so they won't be as frequent. But when you get them, boy oh boy, you are going to be shaking your head at the hail or the amount of rain or the amount of snow that can come down in one particular storm, and I think that is going to be the concerning factor. And so really you would be very well advised to have at least 72 hours store of food set aside, some water, some batteries, some flashlights, things, everything, that make sure things are charged up, especially if a storm's coming. You just start charging everything to make sure it's charged up. Maybe have a generator on hand, some gasoline that you use for a lawnmower. Instead of having a 2-gallon tank, have a 5-gallon jug. So you've always got that big supply. You can throw it into a little generator and get you through the worst, keep your fridge going. Just some very simple things that you can turn an absolute disaster into an unplanned camping trip. And there really are just some very simple things, some videos out there, putting a small garden in, having a generator, having some food set aside, some dry food, some canned food, some water, some means of cooking other than electricity, or if you have a propane stove, you're probably going to be okay with that, and another means of heating that works independently of electricity. Because if you had an atmospheric inversion come down as freezing rain when it's -30 in February, my friend, you are in serious trouble. Yeah, I would imagine the whole hydro system would just come down in a matter of hours. We've never experienced these things. We've never experienced them. So, be the wise Boy Scout and prepare. Don't pitch your tent at the bottom of a hill. Have some food ready to go. Okay, well, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant long weekend. I hope you enjoy the weather, the boating. The locks are not open this weekend because the water is still too high, but I for sure am going to be in the garden for part of the time and in the kayak for the rest of the time. Okay, see you now. You take care. Bye.